All right. Well, everyone, welcome to episode 4 of Hacked by Halftime. I am Travis Weitzel. I will be a co host today. Again, I am a PhD candidate in cybersecurity and then work for the Department of War as a cyber warfare technician. My co host today is Steve Watchers. Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Travis. So I'm Steve Watchers. I've worked with Travis a lot in my career. I retired Army. Now I work for the Department of War as a civilian. I work on the intelligence side. However, a lot of what I deal with on the intelligence side is cyber related. Actually, it's all cyber related. So that's where my expertise and my vision for how I view things comes from as well.
Absolutely. And during this podcast, even though we are members of the Department of War, none of our opinions here are the opinions of the department. They are Steve and I's opinions solely. So we're going to start this episode off. We have an exciting episode. Episode 4 is about the Internet of Things, or IoT devices, and their integration into sports. So to give listeners who may not be familiar with Internet of Things or IoT, these are devices that are connected through networks, but do not require human interaction necessarily to make them operate. So think about your Roomba. If you have a smart thermostat in your home, like a Google Nest, Alexa, and like those other home technologies that people use are all Internet of Things devices, right? So when you start thinking about that in concept, now think about a sports stadium. So a sports stadium really has a an absurd amount of Internet of Thing devices. There you have the payment systems. You also have biometric scanners, the security cameras, jumbotrons. Steve, I'm sure I'm missing some, but yeah, it's a
Yeah, everything, food delivery, logistics, acquisition, everything is tied so that way it makes the job. Internet of Things is the network of stuff and equipment that can function on its own with little to no human interaction. So that way that relieves that pressure and allows it to be automated and do its thing.
absolutely. And that's just in the stadium, right? What we'll see is how the Internet of Things can impact sports even outside the stadium. And that's really highlighted in the first part that we're going to bring up here, which is the sports medicine breach. So in New Hampshire, there's a company called Access Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, right? And what happened to them was there was a ransomware incident, and ransomware, for those listening, is essentially your device is taken over by malicious. It could be a malicious actor or simply a code or a program that takes over that computer, and it will not allow you to use it again, that device, until you pay that individual. So this is a very common tactic. We'll see this all in the news, usually about cyber attacks. It's usually a ransomware attack. But what that allowed, this ransomware attack on Access Sports Medicines, was over 88,000 individuals had their data exposed. And this isn't just simply saying that, for example, John Smith had a torn meniscus. It was their names, social security numbers, date of birth, medical health info. And the way they were able to do that was through the Internet of Things. That's how they were able to access the network. So, with that being said, the provider, in response to this, Access Sports said reached out to all the impacted individuals and told them to just monitor their credit card information. So, and look at their credit scores and all of those kind of things. So it can impact athletes even outside of the day-to-day life, how we would traditionally think about it. And why this matters to sports, right, is that athletes, yes, you can get rehabilitated within the stadium and things of that nature, but a lot of times you're also sent outside of the stadium to go get medical care as well, right? So, Steve, do you want to hit on some of the other why it matters in sports?
Yeah, I mean, so like Travis was saying, right? Like athletes get injured or just, doesn't have to be an injury. It could just be, something sore, whatever the case is. And of course, because they're, especially the pro side and even college level, they're such high value, they get sent to the best doctors in the world. Whether, even if they have to catch a flight from the stadium that night because they got injured in a game to another location to get treated and then eventually catch back up with their team at the home stadium, they often do that. And that's normal. The thing about it is, like, yes, when healthcare providers, which healthcare is one of the top targeted or fields that hackers go after because it's a soft target. because they heavily rely on everything being digital. So that way, if Joe Snuffy is in California getting treatment and then he has to go to, Colorado, they can still pull his records, right? So all that data is there, not just your name and social security number. That's important as well. And we're not getting away from that. But now your health data is out there. Your public health information is out there. And if you tie it back to these athletes and their $1 million deals, like we've said on, multiple podcasts now, that
Yeah.
information can be used against them. So
Not
like,
only that, even in a reputational situation, right?
yeah,
Where
100%.
maybe you didn't want some medical info, no one wants their medical information out there, but even if it's maybe embarrassing, or something that's not occurring during the game, but an off-field incident where you happen to contract something, and that data is out there, I mean, the reputational harm there as well, you can become a meme overnight. Um,
Yeah, just to give you a soft number is what I'll call it. Like the
yeah,
HIPAA Journal, Healthcare Data Breach Statistics in 26 October of this year, so just 10 days ago, they published that in 2023, on an average of 1.99 healthcare data breaches, or 500 or more records were reported each day.
wow. So you're looking at
So
two breaches a day and 500 records.
yeah, and I know like my mother-in-law, she works in the healthcare field, and she has asked myself and my wife multiple questions about cyber stuff because they have gotten hit so many times and they've had to hire people to address the situation, address long-term plans of how to prevent it from happening again. But
Yeah.
it's a very common thing.
And we think stadiums are jam-packed with IoT devices or Internet of Things devices. Hospitals in the medical field have them everywhere, from your heart monitors, tablets where they're taking your information down. It's really, the hospital is now like an IoT hub, if you will.
I can give it a random example of that.
Yeah.
Black Hat DEF CON in the USA Black Hat DEF CON a couple years ago, an individual got up on stage and showed how, the tube systems that some hospitals still use to send like prescriptions and information
Yeah.
and stuff like that, how they send it around the hospital through the tube system. Those are an IoT. And
Wow.
because they were forward facing and not secured properly, they were easily hacked.
Jeez.
And then all they had to do was get into that device, and then now they had access to to pivot from there and hit the entire network.
Wow.
Yep, something as simple as that.
And it's interesting, right? I don't want to say necessarily shift lanes, but to think about it is, from a team perspective or an organizational perspective, you send your athlete to go get this medical work done, and now it's like almost a transfer of risk without blatantly calling it that, but because you're beyond the team's IT network now. You're outside the wire of the safety of what you're used to, and you're hoping that this medical facility, in this case, it would be Access Sports, right? But it could really happen to any medical facility. You're trusting them with super sensitive business information, in this case, injury related information. And you're allowing that facility to kind of hold that risk for you. So it is interesting from that perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, this past weekend, the Washington Commanders quarterback, Jaden Daniels, right?
Yep.
Did you see what happened to him?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the elbow injury,
is
really
dislocated
nasty.
his elbow and just. But anyway, so he got carted off the field. He's going to get taken off, taken care of. But then they're going to send him to probably an orthopedic specialist, right? And who knows where he's going to go? Who knows who he's going to see? And I'm not knocking on. This is not
Yeah.
talking bad about any of those people. But now, like you said, the team of this up and coming, very he's a
Yeah.
good quarterback, and
Superstar. Yeah.
yeah, super good. He came in year one and just blew it out of the water.
Yep.
And he's doing great. But now, because of that injury, and he's going to see a specialist possibly. Somebody else is going to have to assume that risk, and also the risk still sits with the Washington Commanders. But now here's the other side of it, the financial side and the future of Jaden Daniels and how it's going to be handled, because depending literally on what a doctor writes up in his records and how an NFL team, to include the Commanders, when it's time to sign him again or extend his contract, they have to take Jaden Daniels' health into account.
Yeah.
Do they want to give him the top dollar amount? It'd be possibly making the number one paid quarterback in the NFL. If there's a liability later on that he's going to throw a football and his elbow's going to pop out again.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's that. And then I think about it from the sports betting side, just because it's everywhere. where if somebody's listed as questionable and, these malicious actors, these criminals, a lot of times are looking for any advantage to get profit. So if they can get into medical system and say, hey, even though it's listed questionable, I know that this injury, 90% of players play through this injury and can get an upper hand in betting versus odds and stuff like that. It wouldn't shock me to see that occur in the future as well.
No, that's and a good point to that is, I think it was this past weekend. I'd have to look at the date specifically, but the UFC is now under investigation for, gambling investigation,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And Dana White was interviewed, and what he said, and he's aware of it, and they're cooperating. And he said one of the first things they did when they were, it was because they outsourced another organization to look at the betting scheme of it and realized there were some oddities
Yep.
because the UFC's who actually supposedly contacted the FBI.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, Dana White said the first thing they did was contact the fighters and say, "Are you injured?" and didn't tell us.
Oh,
And do people know that?
wow. See,
Because
there
you're
you go.
Yeah, so because if somebody knows, hey, two fighters are going in the ring, especially something like UFC is, which is so
Yeah.
profitable, if you have if bettors know you have an injury that you're hiding, what the likelihood of them betting on
Yeah.
the opposite to make money?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
It
so
And we see this across not the medical side, but I mean, you're mentioning the betting aspect of it. We saw it across the NBA recently where people are getting rolled up by the FBI. We saw it with MLB this year as well. So I think that has to be tied to understanding how sensitive this data is. But one last talking point, at least on the medical side, I wanted to highlight was just I think for teams and organizations, one of the things that we have down in our notes is that you really have to ask who holds your performance slash injury data and are they secured?
yeah,
Because to say as a team, like, hey, we did the right thing, cool. But if your vendor doesn't, if this third party doesn't have the same security standards maybe as you do, then you're left just as vulnerable as the weakest link, right? So
yeah, 100%.
yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I really like that medical aspect, and the UFC thing I think is a great example, just because it could sway the odds so much.
100%.
Yeah. So next, we're gonna go into something that's I think everyone is seeing now if they've been to a stadium recently, and that's connected stadiums or quote unquote smart stadiums, right? And what this does to your attack surface. So it's one of those things that you would probably hear a lot in cybersecurity. And for those unfamiliar with it, it's convenience versus security, right? As how convenient do you want to make it for the fans or your customer? And how much security are you giving up? So we'll jump into a few facts that we have here. So, research with a lot of these recent smart stadiums, which include Internet of Things sensors, and people don't realize these sensors are everywhere within the stadium. If you just look up, you'll see a bunch of probably little devices that are monitoring temperature, biometrics, all kinds of stuff. Then you have the cameras, the ticketing systems, digital turnstiles nowadays where you're scanning your ticket before the turnstile will go. It increases significant it makes the attack surface significantly larger. And then there was a really cool article by HelpNet Security where it says sports venues must vet their vendors to maintain security because the venues are full of connectivity, right? All of these things are intertwined. And what's interesting, and it's not something I necessarily thought of before diving into this, and it just escaped me, but it makes a lot of sense, is a bring your own device. So every fan has a phone, and bring your own device, for example, yeah, smartwatches, everything, right, is usually connected nowadays. And for those who aren't familiar with bring your own device, that's essentially if you were going to work, this is where the term comes from. If you were going to work somewhere and they allowed you to bring your own laptop and phone and connect to their own network versus giving you your laptop or a work phone. So that's what bring your own device is. And if you think about it, each time you attend a sporting event, you are bringing your own device. And the national agency for this in the United States is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is CISA, is what it's called. And CISA documented, it's on their website, but documents the connected devices and integral security considerations for stadiums, underline how one compromised device could lock out fans or disrupt game operations, right? And one of my favorite things I love to highlight whenever we talk or whenever I get a chance to talk IoT and one device taking down the whole thing is I would encourage listeners to go look up the MGM hack
The fish tank.
where they came in through a fish tank. So the fish tank was connected so that way it could notify people when the filter needed to get changed
And
and
regulate the water temperature.
yeah, and malicious cyber actors identified that that was a vulnerability within the network and then got through the rest of the casino's network through the fish tank. So that's a really good example, I think, of even in a stadium. Hey, we've patched 99% of these devices, but there's like one loose device out there that, hey, it wasn't patched, but guess what? Now you have malicious cyber actors in the stadium's network. So Steve, what do you think about all that? I know you looked at it with your research and everything like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's so, to go into a little bit more like a smart stadium, right? Because most of the stuff, people think smart stadium is Wi-Fi or cashless, and that's part of it. But there's other things, like you said, that you don't even think about that are behind the scenes that are happening. That in order for that stadium to operate to function properly and efficiently, these things are happening, like resource optimization, efficient crowd management, i.e., cameras, gates, all that stuff to ensure that you have people going out in and out the right places. Security, obviously, like you discussed, and then also data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
Those systems are doing analysis
Yeah.
to identify, hey, we're seeing an uptick over here in the people, buying drinks. So
Yeah.
not just alcohol, but drinks in general. We might want to make sure we have more bathrooms open over there because people are going to need to go, to the bathroom more often. So let's go make sure those are serviced more often and prepped, things like that. So it's a smart stadium, which I get it, and I don't disagree with it because it's efficiency and it's making life easier for people. However, like you said, that pendulum, it swings, and you got to decide where in the middle where you're comfortable or being more on the convenience or more on the cybersecurity side. And that
Absolutely.
comes down to the organization or the ownership and management of the stadium. One thing I want to say about CISA is CISA does a lot of research for the government and
Yeah.
for organizations and stuff. They recommend change, but there's nothing they can really do other than that. And people think CISA is like makes the decisions. No. CISA recommends things to people. They have they have some ability to enforce policy, but they're the ones that are out there writing the policy.
Yeah.
They're not the one. They don't have the personnel. They don't have the resources to sit there and say, is every single stadium secure? Is
Exactly.
every team secure? No, they're saying, hey, in order to maintain the best security posture you can, we recommend these, arbitrary number, 50
Yeah.
things. Check these 50 things.
Yep.
And an organization or a city might say, hey, out of those 50, we have 3 that we really can't get to right now because we're planning on upgrading next year anyway. So let's not worry about that. Okay. Yes. However,
Yeah.
you just left a window or the back door to your house open for somebody to come in at any point.
Yep. And now you have to, as that stadium security personnel, cybersecurity personnel, hone in and understand you have to put extra layers of security to mitigate that risk of those 3 things that you didn't do, right? And if not, you're gonna you're gonna get caught. We've seen it time and time again, and this malicious actors are very good at what they do. And it's interesting because I was trying to think. There are, if listeners want to go out and Google, there are instances of IoT or stadiums being hacked. Right, it's going to happen. But 2 things I thought of when we were doing some research for this topic was the Super Bowl with the Ravens, and I think it was the Niners, where the lights went out. And that wasn't caused by a malicious cyber actor or anything like that. But the lights went out and it delayed the Super Bowl for like an hour. Even though the lights were working again and everything like that, the world's most prominent sporting event was delayed an hour because they were trying to make sure it wouldn't happen again for player safety, for broadcasting and all of these things. And it made me think as a malicious actor, you don't even have to go into necessarily exfil data to cause the disruption that you want. You can just sit there, if you think about it, and mess with the lights, right? Or something like that. That's not that difficult to do. And then it also happened actually this past weekend. This was a really cool clip that I happened to see was the end of the game and a team was going for a 2-point conversion. And during their 2-point conversion, the lights went out. And then they came on like 30 seconds later and they converted the 2-point conversion. But just think about how dangerous that is of you have athletes that are prime top physical shape and the lights go out and it's completely dark in the stadium, especially in like a dome, it's like turning the lights out in a room and you can't see where you're running, the chance of injury has to skyrocket. Just small things like that I was thinking of where it's like, hey, I don't necessarily need to exfil or take away all of this sensitive data. I can still mess with the product on the field.
Yeah, once when it comes to a brand or a name, organization, trust.
Yeah.
If people are spending their hard-earned money to attend a game, because let's say somebody even flew in from out of town to see their favorite team play, right? And they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and they go to this sporting event, and all it takes is for one little thing like that to happen, or you know, the cashless system to go down, whatever the case is. Name something that would cause a significant, not even significant, just an inconvenience to the 30 to 50,000 fans that are there. That organization has now lost the trust of its fans,
Yeah.
and that is a hard thing to get back.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, especially nowadays when tickets are through the roof,
Yep.
you have families that will save up for years to just go to one event. And you make a great point, right? Because when you purchase the ticket, and we'll close out the stadium, the smart stadium piece with this, but like when you purchase the ticket, you're assuming your app is going to work. If you're using like Ticketmaster, SeatGeek, whatever, that when they scan it, the app works. Hey, my turnstile is going to open. The scoreboard is going to display those crazy moments that everyone loves to see. And in all reality, that can all be taken away by a single IoT device, as small as it is. And it could cost millions. Because, like you said, if I pay an exorbitant amount of money to go fly somewhere, go to an event, and then I get there and it's not worth it, I'm going to trash that event. I'm going
Yeah.
to completely,
100%.
yeah. And I'm going to get online and people are going to
Yep.
grab that. And I mean, we've seen it with countless times with streaming services. Let Monday Night Football cut out for like 2 minutes in the middle of a meaningless game in the third quarter, and people are online already talking about how ESPN is unbearable, right? So I think that's critical.
Well, so it made me look something up real quick. I think it was
Yeah.
this past Monday. Streaming issues were caused by a dispute between Disney, which
Yeah.
owns ESPN and ABC, and YouTube TV, which resulted in ESPN and ABC channels being removed from the streaming service. The blackout prevented YouTube TV subscribers from watching the game and affected other college football games over the previous weekend.
Yeah. And it's,
So, how much does it cost to subscribe to those
oh,
streaming services?
yeah. I can tell you right now, I pay for
Yeah.
YouTube TV and I paid
Yeah.
for Sunday Ticket, and YouTube TV is like $80 a month, I think.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
because of a dispute between the organizations who owns, who has the rights versus
Yeah.
who's, televising it or streaming it, excuse me. Now thousands of people couldn't watch the game.
Yep. And I think they said viewership was down almost 23% or something like that because of it. So and that's with a dispute, right? If you talk about an IoT device, and what's funny is a lot of those cameras now are IoT devices. They're not hardwired in. And what's crazy about that is that's just YouTube TV, right? And if you were to take away the broadcast via an IoT device at a stadium, you're talking about 100% of people not being able to see it. Now you're causing a riot, most likely. Yeah. Wild times. Wild times. So we'll move on.
People love their sports.
Oh, yeah. It's a religion. So we'll move on to the next topic. This one's pretty wild as well. I just love IoT, to be honest with you. It's a choose your own adventure for malicious cyber actors, and from a security standpoint. I will say,
it's changed so much in the
yeah.
last 10 years.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
100%.
I still remember coming back from one of my deployments when the iPhone was brand new and everybody was going to buy it because the apps were the thing. And we're like, why
What
is
is
this
it?
app? This is not going to be big.
Yeah. Nope. Remember the most famous app on the original like iPod or iPhone 1 was like the beer drinking thing, where all it
Yeah.
did was look like it was ridiculous. But
So,
anyway, this one's pretty good. It's the wearable and biometrics vulnerabilities. So this is for those who are unaware, wearable technologies are becoming really almost like you'll see them all over sports.
they're the norm.
Yeah, it's really becoming the norm, and it's to get advanced data to gain any kind of competitive edge that you possibly could. And there was recently research that showed how much these devices are actually being increasingly worn, along with different sensors biomechanical devices, and then what that looks like from a cybersecurity risk perspective with data transmission, pairing, and then not only that, it's updating the firmware on these things, right? So firmware is, think of that as like your Apple Watch when it says, "Hey, I need to update." It's updating to make sure that it can take care of vulnerabilities that have been identified. They have to do the same thing with these sensors that the players wear and all of these kind of different technologies. But a lot of them are using AI as well now. So the data is sent to a database, and then they have AI kind of analyze that. There was a really good ArcSiv paper that came out of band signal injection attacks, which shows how when these sensors are doing their measures in wireless sensor networks, they can be tampered with or spoofed. And I think that one is really interesting because you can start to completely if they're using AI, right? Because you have to analyze the data that quickly. It's interesting because then you can throw off that whole data set. So if a team is like, "Hey, I can run this play because it works 99% of the time according to analytics," but you call the wrong play because your analytics have been spoofed or poisoned, just makes it very fascinating. And then additionally, smart stadium, like we talked about before, but these wearable devices for biometrics can also be exploited, usually because they have weak security, because they're meant to be integrated across multiple things. So again, that convenience to risk factor, they choose convenience. They have to in order for the device to actually fulfill its purpose. Due to that, they're highly vulnerable, and then they can be used to pivot it into the larger network. So, Steve, what are you thinking about the wearable devices when you're doing your homework this week on this?
So wearable devices like, and don't get me wrong, I wear one, right? I wear a Garmin
Mhm.
watch. That can be considered a wearable device because it tracks heart rate, sleep, body activity, stress level, all that stuff. Wearable devices are everywhere. You have the ones that are the rings now that can do all the same stuff. And mind you, that's just what's on the market for everyday people like us to buy. These sports organizations, professional, collegiate level, Olympics, stuff like that, they're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into these much better devices to collect this data in order to ensure that their athletes are, you know, performing at the highest level possible. But like you said, these things have to be able to update. They have to be able to integrate with multiple systems. If a bioengineering, doctor, because that's typically the kind of person that will look at that data as a bioengineer. Yeah, bioengineers, they're over here on the sideline tracking all the information that those devices are sending to their laptop or their, iPad, whatever the case is, right? In order to send the information up to most likely a cloud to store that data and to do the analytics on immediately because they need those results to see, hey, so, the quarterback's throwing too many passes. We need to switch it up or we're going to burn his arm out. The pitcher, in the last 3 games, whatever the case is, he's throwing too many pitches, whatever the case may be. But it's a huge vulnerability because there are so many, the old saying from Shrek, it's like an onion. There's so many
Yeah.
layers to this because you have the individual wearing the device and the device is collecting all that biometric data.
Yeah.
Then it's going to, being sent up, through whatever network they're using to the device, to the cloud service, or whatever the case is. However, whatever data center it's going to, because in order for them to properly analyze that data, you need a lot of power. You
Yeah.
need a lot of system. You need strong systems. You can't just do that with a basic laptop you buy from, Best Buy. The compute power to do that. So it's going to something somewhere else to do all this for you. So how is the device being worn secured?
Yeah.
Who's responsible for that? The individual with that iPad that's receiving that data or whatever device that's receiving that data immediately on the field to assist and provide recommendations to coaches and staff. Then going to the server, the server's being stored between, right there, that's, at a minimum 3 to 4 layers
Exactly.
are there. And oh my God, it's
Yeah,
so,
it's a nightmare, and that's
yeah,
what I think, but at the same time, like we talked about, even though it's a security nightmare, the strategic advantage it can provide you on
yeah,
the field,
yep,
invaluable, right? That's why you
100%.
see so many teams using it. And one thing that's interesting here, and I think it does introduce it, is the supply chain aspect of this.
Yeah,
So if
scrim.
if teams aren't understanding where these devices are coming from, they could be built in purposely with what we would call backdoors, where the data is not only sent to the team, but it's sent somewhere else as well. And that could be bettors, right? Like criminals that are running betting, underground betting situations. It could be other nations that just want data to collect data. And then, like you said too, right? Like the data from it's something I really didn't think about till you said it, but the data from these specific devices really are something that could be reused in like an NIL
Hmm.
deal or
Contract negotiations.
yeah, contract endorsement deals, all of these things where it's like, hey, your top speed used to be 22 miles per hour wide receiver or track athlete, and now your top speed that you hit last year is only 19 miles per hour. So clearly you have to be injured, but really it could be that either the data was manipulated or it's just it wasn't a secure device and it's not working as it's intended to. So it's really fascinating from that aspect as well.
Yeah, like there's so much out there. It's and like you actually brought up something that I wasn't sure if I was going to bring up. But I know of a case where even an app, right? Like you download an app, let's say, a GPS app,
Okay.
and you tell it, "Hey, I want to go to this location." So now your app on your phone or the device you're using knows where you're currently at and knows where you're trying to go. Not only that, but it also sends grid coordinates for all that stuff. Like
Mm,
it has grids because most of those on the backside utilize longitude, latitude.
yeah.
So there's grids tied into it, obviously, because to program your route, it's got to know how to get
Yeah.
from point A to point B. And in this situation, it was found out that that app on the backside
Mhm.
was not just sending the information to the servers in the U.S., but also servers to the servers in a foreign country.
I'll see. Yep.
And it was a big deal,
Yeah.
a very big deal, because it was like, why is this data being sent to this country, this foreign
Exactly.
country? What do they need all that for? We'll come to find out it's because that's where the company that built part of the company that built this app.
Yeah.
That's where their server stack was. That's where their server, their warehouse was servers.
And if you think about it, right, it's funny. Well, it's not funny, but it does highlight the amount of foreign investments that have gone into sports as well, right? Especially American sports. I mean, Europe sports as well, or even
Look at the Middle East.
yeah,
The Middle
with
East
the
has been
Saudi Arabians standing up.
yeah,
The
soccer,
yeah,
racing, like all that
paying
stuff.
all
Like
these
they're getting,
athletes
yep,
and then also investing into becoming minority stake owners in North American sports. But it's just those kind of things I think aren't probably thought about as much within the sports world. They just put on the hey, we put on the devices, we're good to go, right? And a lot of that's in the helmet or in the shoulder pads, in the pants, things of that nature. But to close this one out, something for the listeners to kind of think about because I don't think I think this drives it home a lot better is okay, so that little sensor within that shoulder pad, we'll say, or maybe it's on a hockey goalie's pads, right? But every sensor that is on an athlete is literally like a node within a network. So think about
beacon.
yeah, think about it instead of it being like the size of a penny, think about them being strapped with iPhones or with laptops. And that's really what it's representing is it's a node on that network, it's a device on that network, and that should hopefully paint the picture for you. And then on top of that, if it's not encrypted, patched, or secured, someone else could own that input. And it's not difficult to do. We've seen companies with so many layers of security still get hacked. So if you think that that sensor, oh, no one would ever do that, just think of the fish tank in Las Vegas, right? Uh, and there's always a way. So we'll move on to the next topic here, a second to last topic in regards to this episode, and it's fake ticketing, phishing, and online fraud around sports when it comes to IoTs. So Sportsbug, which is kind of a smaller company, but still they put out some good stuff. They put a article out there why stadium Wi-Fi has become sports' biggest security risk. And when I read that title, I was laughing because I said in my head, hey, Steve wrote a whole paper about this that got published. And it's funny because they hit some of the stuff that you talked about, and then they went and expanded, right? And it's not a published article. It's really someone just writing a news article, if you will. But they hit some of the same points as you, where it's like the venues now have become completely digitized and they run on that, which is great. And then they also highlight some other things that I found interesting, which is like fake ticket sites, the phishing,
Yep.
credential thefts, DDoS attacks through these IoT devices, and then ticketing systems are on the rise. So DDoSes on ticketing systems are rising. I didn't see the data that they used for that. But I did find it interesting because a DDoS on a ticketing system is really, if a malicious cyber actor did that, a really smart way to try to get after an organization. Because you think about how many people are lined up at the stadium when you try to go to any sporting event, and imagine the ticketing system just not working. What would be the backup, right? Like you start going through, okay, well, how do we know this QR code's real? How do we know it's fake?
Yeah.
And all those kind of things. And then there's another article that was pulled into this, but really thinking about like the vendor ecosystem within the ticketing sector. So for the audience, the vendor ecosystem, think about if pay Steve's company to hire the people that will scan the tickets, and then another company to give me the little ticket scanner device as people scan QR codes, and then another company to hold that data and make sure the ticket is valid. That's 3 different vendors right there. So that's like a vendor ecosystem. And when you look at a stadium, as Steve pointed out earlier, it's like the merchandising, food and beverage, all that goes into it. But it creates more attack surfaces for online fraud and phishing and credential compromise. So the one part I wanted to hit, Steve, was that DDoS on the ticketing system. And then just because you're the expert here on your whole papers on like the security that's not physical, what are your thoughts with IoT devices in that regard?
So an example I would give, and I'd have to do digging to figure out what it was, but not so much sport related, but you were talking about the DDoS on the ticketing
Yeah.
system. A few years back, I want to say it was Comic-Con, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that one. But you have just like sports, you have a very specific fan pool that is awaiting to buy tickets to go to Comic-Con, or if that's what it was, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And those kind of people are sitting there knowing at 8:00 tonight is when it opens to buy. So you literally have thousands of people worldwide sitting there like at 8:00, I'm hitting enter to purchase my ticket, and get into their network, get into their system to purchase the ticket.
Yeah.
And somebody did a DDoS attack on it
Oh my gosh.
and denied, because that's,
Everybody.
denial of service, and everybody got, it was delayed, like the ability to purchase tickets. I want to say it was delayed like 30 or 45 minutes.
And people are going to be going nuts.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I got to find it, but I remember reading about it and just thinking, well, and mind you, I'm not a, person who dives into Comic-Con, whatever it was. I remember mentioning it to my wife and she's like, no, that's a big deal. I'm like, why? How many people? She's like, hundreds of thousands. I'm like, really? And she tied it back to Big Bang Theory, because I do watch a lot of Big Bang. And she's like, remember the episode when all the guys are sitting in the living room trying to buy tickets to Comic-Con? And I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, that's a real thing. I'm like, I didn't know that.
I mean, think about that, right? Because then you got all these people, usually at a sporting event. Some, I will say, the minority are sober, right? Or at least I would say haven't drank an alcoholic beverage yet. But you do have a lot of fans that are drinking alcohol. They want to get into the stadium, and just imagine how angry people get when like their phone won't connect to the Wi-Fi, and as a result, they can't open their app or like explore an internet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. They get flustered. They lose their mind. Yeah.
And 9 tickets.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, I just want to get on the plane. Like, calm down, the plane's not going anywhere. But it's the same theory. Like,
Yeah.
people
Now
get
imagine
frustrated.
that at a sporting event,
Well,
you're trying to get in and you're going to get chaos. Like, I think it would turn cyber into physical, right?
Okay.
Because I could see fans pushing through and fights breaking out, all the kind of craziness.
I'm still getting in. I'm hopping this fence.
Yeah. Like the apocalypse. It would look apocalyptic, I guarantee you.
Well, you brought up a good point too, and it made me think of your phones, right? Because we were talking about the Internet of Things.
Yeah.
In their phone or their watch, and think of an Apple Watch, or whatever the case is. Like mine doesn't do all that because I'm not into that. But people bring in their phones. And just like at an airport, right? You want to see where am I at in the airport? Because you're like at a very large airport, like Atlanta or,
Yeah.
O'Hare or something. So you're like, okay, I'm landing here in Chicago or Atlanta or wherever. I'm landing at gate D7, but I need to get to J9. How do I
Yeah.
get there? So you go to your phone, and usually the airline app have a map or whatever. But what has to happen in order for it to tell you how to get there? You have to enable location services.
Yep.
And like me, my location's always off on everything. But when in those situations, I'm like, how do I get to this? I need to get
Yeah.
there now because I'm like, my plane's boarding as we speak because we landed late. Same thing in a stadium. If you
Yeah.
need to use something, hey, your location services need to be activated in order
Yeah.
for
That's a great point.
or in order for you to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Well, guess what? Then the individual forgets to go back into that app individually and say, nope, you cannot have my location at all times.
Yeah.
Because guess what it's always doing? Those
Track
apps are always sharing your data. That's part of it.
100%.
And that's what something
That's
people
how
don't
they
think
make
about is
their money.
they make
I
a
mean,
change. Yeah. They're very physically conscious about their security of their phone or whatever the case is, but something out of the norm has to happen for it to be more convenient. So they'll make a change. Like, oh, I'm only at this game for the next 3 hours. Let me just change this setting and I'll change it
yeah.
back when I leave. And they forget.
Yep. No, that's a great point.
Like it's something as simple as that. But again, talking about the Internet of Things, that's all it takes is something that simple,
Yeah.
especially cashless.
Yeah.
How many people, I don't do it, but how many people put their credit card information on their phone so they can
Yep.
just meh,
Yep.
meh,
Good to go.
or click a button on their phone, double click the button and it
Yep.
purchases. Like
Exactly.
that's a bad idea, man. Man, that's probably why my wife gets 3 Amazon packages a day. I don't know. So, but again, all your financial data is in there. Like it's most of us nowadays use our phone to get in our bank accounts.
Yep. All of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just layer upon layer. Like it's the old onion theory.
Yeah.
Whoever knew Shrek the cartoon would teach us
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Cyber by Shrek, right?
Yeah.
And we'll close this out, right? Because I think with the stadium aspect, as you're trying to get in, and we talk about it, it would be apocalyptic. I imagine in my head, to be honest with you, what I'm imagining is Bill's Mafia when they're like how they jump through the table at the beginning of the when they're tailgating and all that kind of thing.
Or the Knicks.
Or the Knicks, right? Just think about that. But from a fan's perspective, it would be an annoyance and you could have a riot. But from a franchise perspective, imagine if you're the franchise where there's like chaos because people can't get in. I mean, you're talking about brand erosion big time. And then you're possibly talking about revenue loss because of the lawsuits that are going to come in from people being injured or
Yep.
the chaos, emotional distress, right? Like all of these kind of things. It's just a black eye, not only I think for that franchise, but it would be for the entire sports league. It would be a mess.
Like even think of a city because
Yeah.
after the Dodgers won the World Series the other night, not riot. Like when I say people rioted, people
Not
celebrated.
Philadelphia
Yeah,
style riot. You know what I mean?
they celebrated and it spilled into the city.
Yeah.
And then the law enforcement had to get involved to secure and make sure people
Yeah.
were safe. And it's like all because of a sporting event. Now that was a positive thing. Imagine had a LA lost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Things of that nature, right?
Yeah, like now you have anger involved, and
And that's what you would get if like, hey, I can't get into the stadium. And we talked about how expensive tickets are.
yeah.
There's going to be swinging involved.
I've watched people fight at a NFL game because they couldn't get their beer.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. So I think that's important. I think it's important for physical stadium security individuals to kind of play that through their head, how they would handle that situation. So I thought that was a good one. And then the last one is probably something that we've discussed a ton, Steve, is Jumbotron. All right. So for those unaware listeners, this is worth a Google in itself. Pretty messed up, but I think it highlights the dangers of cyber within the sports sector and industry fairly well, at least when it comes to the physical aspect of the industry, when we're talking like stadiums and things of that nature. So this individual worked for the Jacksonville Jaguars. His name is Samuel Thompson. He was hired as a contractor in 2013 to consult on and operate the Jumbotron system at Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. What he did, according to the Department of Justice, so this will tell you how serious this case became, was he installed remote access software on a spare server in the team server room. I want to put, Steve, you're laughing, right? But like, let's put this in perspective for everyone for that maybe isn't familiar with cyber. So we'll break apart that first statement there, which is remote access software. That is pretty much what it says it is. It allows somebody to not physically be present wherever they installed that, but still have control over that. So when we say that in this case, we're talking about a spare server. A server, think about like when you click Microsoft Outlook when you're at work or at home, it's going to go, that service is coming from a server. It's going to go grab it, right? And pull it down and say, here's your Outlook and all this, all the services that you use within a system. So in this case, the Jacksonville Jaguars is very common for everyone to have this. You'll hear the term server room. And a server room is essentially a room where they have all these servers and it has all the data that the team uses on a day-to-day basis, everything they're saving, all the services they need. And in this case, they had a spare server and this individual somehow got access and put his own remote access software on that server. However, so this was in 2013 when they first hired him. 5 years later in 2018, he accessed that spare server and then sent commands to the Jumbotron while it was during a live game. So imagine you're sitting there at the Jaguars game and all of a sudden the Jumbotron starts going nuts. And what it did was it caused repeated malfunctions of the video board network. So the Jumbotron was essentially, think of it as out of business. I think I remember hearing a story where he did some other offenses as well. He was like a predator of some sort. So when they arrested him, they found a bunch of other really nasty things about this individual. And I think if he would have put that up on the Jumbotron, because I'm pretty sure he was also, let me look this up to make sure that I have this correct before I don't want to slander anybody. But if I remember doing my homework correctly, yeah, he was it says right there in the Department of Justice, a prolific child molester. So imagine if he's putting those kind of nasty images up on the Jumbotron. You want to talk about a lawsuit? You're talking about 90,000 Jacksonville Jaguars fans, and you're also talking about traumatizing children at the game, right? Like just really filthy stuff that could have happened there. And then in March of 2024, so this is six years after. So we started in 2013. He did this act in 2018. 6 years later, he was sentenced to 220 years in federal prison based off a combination of offenses, including that unauthorized command to protected computers, among those other crimes, like we discussed, the nasty stuff. Right? Steve, what the heck, man? Like, you want to talk about to me, what we would call probably like a milestone situation of just, hey, you want to see the worst thing that could happen? They almost got the worst thing that could possibly happen, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, you're talking about that one specifically with the sports stadium and how influential it is. A good example you and I already discussed was just the other day after the announcement came out of who won the New York City mayor seat. Apparently at Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, you're probably butchering it, but
yeah, I don't mean to butcher it.
The newly elected New York
City mayor during his party. As basically his congratulation party, they were all in this room, this banquet hall, celebrating. There's a video of it. The crowd is just, amongst each other, talking, celebrating, having a good time because he won. Good on him. And then all of a sudden, in the video, you can see on the main screen up on stage, something pops up, a pro-Trump, like Trump is still your president or something along those lines, pops up on the screen. And it takes a few seconds for everybody to start realizing what's on the screen. And then the entire party just stops and people start booing.
Wow.
So something of that effect, right? Yes, that's not tied to sports. However, when you're talking about the Jumbotron thing, if somebody wanted to do a political statement, like we know the Israel-Palestine conflict was a big deal, right? That took a lot of people left, either direction. And I'm not going to get into all that. But what I'm going to say is, imagine if you're at a sporting event and something pro-Palestine or pro-Israel popped up on the screen, the amount of problems you're going to have with that.
Yeah, absolutely. A hacktivist gets in there and...
oh, man. Like, you're talking political issues. You're talking financial issues now. It's never ending because Jumbotrons, everybody knows when you go to a game, regardless of what game it is, Jumbotron is what everybody's watching because, especially for those up in the nosebleed section that can't actually see the game, they're looking at the, that instant replay that's on because, because a play took place and now they're looking at it again to see if somebody
Yep.
got a first, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
There was an out, but everybody relies on that jumbotron for many things, and that's where they advertise a lot of stuff, because
Stadiums
like
are built around jumbotrons
yeah,
now. Like you
100%.
that way everyone gets a good view. And then not only that, most of the times, like, hey, you know how many commercial breaks are in sports now? I know every sports fan will agree with me and attest to me to that. But like you're looking at the jumbotron during the commercials to see what kind of goofiness, you know what I mean, they're gonna have with live operations and all those kind of things. So I can only like we're talking about with the Jacksonville guy being a real nasty guy or and putting some of that, imagine that going up there, or like a political statement, or even another nation state coming in and saying, hey, you know, the US sucks or something like that. It could spiral so quick. And what's nuts about it is that Jumbotron really like cool. The stadiums looks beautiful on the outside, blah, blah, blah. The Jumbotron is the focal point besides what's happening on the field.
Yep.
Most of the people, like you said, use the Jumbotron to track what's going on the field. Close first down. Hey, I'm going to look up there and see if they got it and look at the spot and all those kind of things. But I mean, if you want to talk about just completely throwing a wrench in live operations, and I think from an IT, you have the IT perspective here, which is, hey, the lights are still blinking green, but it ain't doing what it's supposed to do. You
Or
have
we've
this,
lost control.
yeah, you have the cybersecurity side where, hey, you have somebody you don't know who it is with remote access to everything. And then I also think about, again, we're crossing that cyber into physical boundary, the live operations people that are responsible for game day operations and making sure the product is pristine, right? Like it could devolve so quickly based off of one device just going down.
Yep, that's all it's. But
Yeah,
it's like you said, it's one device, but it's the device.
exactly.
Like people will bear through if it's a little too hot because
Yeah.
the thermostat got messed with, or a little too cold.
Yep.
People will bear through. I mean, look at people. People go sit outside in 4 feet of snow to watch a game. It's
Yeah.
a
I'll
thing.
go shovel
People,
the stadium for
yeah,
$10 if they get
yeah,
it.
right. Like they'll do all that, but you take over that jumbotron. And so think about it also is yes, sports, because when you think of a sports facility, you think of a jumbotron, right?
Yeah.
Because it's part of the sporting, but those facilities are also used by singers, performers and
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And they rely on that jumbotron. And
Great point.
think about it as also the halftime show of the Super Bowl, the number
Yeah.
one thing, right? Like I think we talked about before how much it costs to get like 30 seconds
Yeah.
of the halftime show, but like the halftime show is displayed on that.
Yep.
And these companies are paying to have their brand, shown on an ad, basically millions of dollars
Yeah.
to come up on that jumbotron. At least, let's, again, not a real thing, but I'm just making numbers up.
Yeah.
Let's say, company A says, hey, sports facility, I'm going to pay you $10 million to ensure my commercial or my ad pops up on your jumbotron at least 3 times throughout this game. And then it doesn't happen.
I want my money back.
Yeah,
One.
well, yeah. One, I want my money back. Two, we're going to court, and I'll see you
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. And then it is from the perspective of cybersecurity too. I would like to kind of, I guess, remind the audience or maybe just relay some food for thought is when people when you hear cybersecurity people or cyber people talking about risk, there's many ways to measure risk and all this kind of stuff, but it's really interesting because in this case, the Jaguars probably did all their right things with IT doing like vulnerability scans, et cetera, et cetera. And, they could have been 100% compliant, no threat really from an external entity. Instead, this came from an insider threat, right? And it just shows you the layers of security and risk that you have to account for. And I want listeners to understand that it's not just simply like, hey, you have to stop a hacker from getting into your
Yep.
system, a malicious actor from getting into your system. It's like literally, like you said, the Shrek thing, man. It's layers all the way down to the core, and it's just it's brutal, and it goes back to IoT, right? Because now what a stadium used to be, maybe like, well, I'll just make up a number, but like 100 endpoints. And endpoints are just like the amount of devices on the network within a stadium. And now you're probably in the thousands, if not tens of thousands of endpoints.
Yeah, like it's just it, it's scary because again, like you were talking about as well, a stadium or organization, whatever the case is, when it comes to a sports organization, can have all their T's crossed and I's dotted when it comes to their cybersecurity. The inside of the threat piece from a subject matter expert inside the organization who already understands the security apparatus that that team or facility utilizes and knows how to properly establish something behind the scenes. That is a scarier, less likely statistically,
Yeah.
but less likely, much, much scarier because those individuals know how to, get around, get behind that wall.
Yeah.
They know
Absolutely.
because they have the insider knowledge of what's happening and how things are done. So like this individual did with the Jacksonville Jaguars, he put in, some malicious code on the back end for remote services in a server, and the servers, and he probably programmed it in to where when there's scans happening, it's not
Yep.
picking up as something malicious.
Nope.
And then
It's
he
meant
can
to be
wait.
there.
Yeah, it's meant to be there. And, they're not going through every line of code every single time. Absolutely not. That's why you have tool sets out there that do this for you. But it's a tool set doesn't know to look for that because, hey, this should not be there because it
Exactly.
was put by somebody who was in an insider. That is a much more, in my opinion, scarier situation, but less
Yeah.
likely.
Yeah, 100%. And to put a bow on it, right, is like in sports, like I think we hit on a lot of these to be honest with you, but in sports really like the visual experience is part of the brand. That's what it's all about. It's pageantry, it's putting on a show, and it's the action on the field no matter what event you're at. And then a hacked jumbotron isn't just like, hey, like this is scary, but it's going to hit the fans, and I think you nailed it. It hits the fans, the broadcast partners, because now you got people on live TV seeing it as well, and then sponsors all at once. So you're really, if you're a malicious actor and you're able to do that, you've killed all birds with one stone. And I think with the Jaguars case, right, it proves the risk isn't hypothetical. Like this stuff can and will happen. And I think that's what's important for those within the sports industry to understand.
Well, I'll give another example, and I say example, but so when I was doing my research for my paper, well, I was getting my master's degree,
Yeah.
and when I was interviewing security professionals, managers, stuff like that of these sports facilities and these teams, we were talking about like, so my, not that I want to get too much in my paper, but the three things I talked about heavily in my paper were the physical security, personnel security, and then cybersecurity.
Okay.
So when it came to physical and personnel, the teams and the organizations, as well as the stadium managers and stuff, they had systems in place to do red teaming. Red
Mm,
teaming being where they have people come in and act from the inside and try to identify those things, but they're being paid by the organization. Hey, we need you to find our weaknesses, whether it's physical, whatever the case is. We want you to find if somebody was going to, physical, cyber, whatever the case is, if somebody was going to be malicious in any way, what's the easiest way for them to do? What can we know? We need to identify those avenues of approach from the individuals trying to do the malicious activities. So they have red teams out there that will go into stadiums and try to do things to gain physical access of areas and stuff like that they're not supposed to. That is a common thing. When I asked about, do you have red teams coming in for this from the cybersecurity aspect? I wasn't getting a lot of great answers because, and I say this in my paper, a lot of organizations still don't view cybersecurity as part of the overall security apparatus because they
mm.
primarily look at it as physical and personnel. So I said, why, and I'm sure people are doing it, don't get me wrong, because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
being a red team hacker is a very common thing nowadays. There's companies out there that you can hire to come in and say, I need you to test my entire network, find any weaknesses I have, vulnerabilities, backdoors, anything I'm not supposed to, whatever the case is, tell them what you want, and you have to give them the keys of the kingdom, though.
yeah.
They
And
do
you're
that
gonna pay
for,
pretty penny.
yeah, you are. So again, it's just one of those things like it's out there and it's happening. But again,
Yeah,
how often does it get caught?
until we stop doing the Spider-Man meme of security pointing at IT and IT pointing at security and saying, "No, they're cybersecurity." I think until that is broken, then we're gonna run into these issues. And I have seen some professional sports teams hire like CISOs and things of that nature. And I don't want to we are not discrediting anyone out there, but it is just it's difficult to get a read on these things when there isn't a singular policy. There isn't like, and you highlight in your paper, which I definitely appreciate, is everyone's doing something a little different. And then on top of that, there's no data being put out, right? There's not like an NFL annual report regarding cyber threats or anything like that, or a DHS report or anything regarding sports specifically. So I think it causes individuals who are curious about it, like you and I don't want to say to speculate, but it does allow your mind to wonder, like, hey, what's going on here? And it doesn't give you a good and warm feeling, is what I would say.
Yeah, like I'll say my interest slash the way I started, like literally came up with what I was going to do research on for months and months and all that stuff was I had a whiteboard mounted in my living room
There you go.
and I was looking at topics and things too. Well, I want to I'm interested in this and this. Started writing them out, and I said, well, if I look at it this way, who's doing research on this? Who's talking about this? I just started writing topics, and then circling and okay, this is being connected over here because there's some information out there. I was like, oh, this is a very broad area, but it took me literally on a whiteboard to start everything, and
Yeah.
then for me, it was kind of from there Pandora's box.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Trust me, I've spiraled as well, as you know, when you get those phone calls from me saying, have you seen this?
Yep.
Or, hey, have you thought about this? And that's how we come up with podcast episodes. So yeah, to wrap up the framing for this episode, really, again, I think we've provided real world examples that really highlight these aren't theoretical anymore. It's not Steve and I just making up things and saying, oh, spooky cyber. Is really the way we're looking at it now is really operational risks that we're talking about. And it's affecting the organization itself, the team, athletes, the venue, and fans when you start to really pair these things together. And then cyber resilience in sports. Cyber resilience is a broad term, but it essentially means the same thing it means everywhere else, is the ability for you to get punched and then get back up. So, hey, you took down one of my pieces of equipment. Do I have a backup piece of equipment if I need to shut that one off from the network? But it's really interesting for sports in this case because, okay, you're going to audit the vendors. That makes sense, third party auditing. But it kind of goes, if you go away from the stadium, like we talked about with the medicine stuff, how do you audit that medicine partner, right? Or the person that's providing your players healthcare? Um, that's a nightmare.
I have an example real quick of that. Think about
Yeah,
how bad it
please.
could be. You always see the videos and the pictures of players like posting from inside the locker room or inside somewhere in the stadium, right? Blah
Yeah,
blah. All it takes, and this happens all the time, and you and I know this, and most
yeah,
cyber personnel know this, is all it takes is for the wireless router that's on the roof, so that way you can make sure you maintain Wi-Fi,
yeah.
has the IP address on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will tell you that's a real thing because I'm not going to say which company,
Yep.
but recently I walked into a internet service providing company to have a conversation about something.
Yeah.
And as I'm standing there waiting, to talk to a representative, my wife taps me on the shoulder and goes, "Look up." So I looked up and there's 3 routers right above us. On those routers, on a, those like you type it into a thing and it prints it out for you, the little label
Yep.
makers.
Yeah,
On
yeah,
those
yeah.
routers via label makers is the IP address and the MAC address.
Perfect. Thank you.
And it's to make things easier for people. Convenience.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's just like you're an internet service provider of all things, and everybody who walks into this store can look up and see your MAC address and your IP address for your 3 routers on a roof.
Just all it takes is one player in the locker room.
Dude, because you know that stuff's out there. I'm sorry, but like
100%. And then
you know,
it's
something
and
that's
that's the
changed.
thing too, I
Yeah,
think is probably a lot of listeners who are unfamiliar with cyber would say, well, cybersecurity people will take care of it or, whatever but everyone's built differently, right? And another great recent example is like the Louvre security camera system being
yeah.
the password being Louvre, right? There's just stuff like that. It's human error that causes a lot of this, but
Humans are the number one
yep, threat to it.
vulnerability to any network.
Yep. So with that, we talked about the auditing. I think another big piece is educating athletes and staffs. It's not just an athlete responsibility. It falls on the staff 100%. And then you got to actively map your attack surface at all points in the sports ecosystems. It's rapidly changing. You got to constantly have a pulse on what's going on. And then finally, I want to really highlight to end the episode is I think the Internet of Things conversation really highlights is the complexity of like the cross domain nature of sports. So you have the sport on the field going on that you have to worry about as a cybersecurity expert, IT expert, to make sure that the product can be seen by everyone. You have the IT systems going on. You got OT going on. You have Internet of Things going on. You have physical infrastructure that you have to worry about. The bathrooms that are regulated probably by some sort of system that regulates all of that. You have athlete branding if something occurs, and then you have fan experience. And I'm sure I'm missing more fingers and I don't want to bring my toes on the screen, right?
Yeah.
But like it is absurd how complex that attack surface is. So I really wanted to hit that to close this out. But Steve, you got any closing thoughts on IoT and everything we
No,
just
like we've hit a lot, and mind you, we've not even scratched the surface.
yeah,
We could probably do a series of 20, 30, 40 podcasts on Internet of Things if we broke it
oh
down to
yeah,
like this one. We're only going to talk about wearables, right? Like whatever the
yep,
case is, just be the individual. So the fan, you are also assuming risk.
yeah,
Be comfortable with the amount of risk you're assuming. And if you're not sure or you don't know what, Google it. You can even Google things nowadays that'll say, hey, what's the best way to make sure my iPhone's the most secure it can be? And it'll tell you. Because,
yep,
like, you go and you do an update on your iPhone or any phone you have, and automatic settings automatically change back to factory default because they have to in order for that update. I almost said malware, excuse me, but firmware to be updated. The device has to be put back in the factory mode it was received in.
exactly.
And now it happens to me all the time. I know every time I do an update on my phone, I have to go back in and verify a lot of things are turned off,
Yeah,
and half the time that they've been turned back on. So just pay attention. It's the never ending. The Internet of Things, and especially a facility, sports facilities, is a never ending thing, and it's only going to get more and more complex. Just like smart cities.
yeah,
Yeah, like if you don't know what a smart city is, go take a look, Google it yourself. But it's same concept. Like that's really what a stadium is. It's its own little smart city.
yep.
So just be aware and take caution.
And like you said, I think a good lesson for people to learn coming out of the Internet of Things discussion is go to whatever phone you use and just click on the Wi-Fi in the setting. And what you'll see is if you live in an apartment complex, you'll probably see a lot of them. But even within your house, you'll see if you have a Tineco, the Tineco wants to be a Wi-Fi router just because it's projecting it's broadcasting a signal, and a Roomba, or if you have a Traeger grill, right, with the Wi-Fi and all this kind of stuff. All of those things are Internet of Things devices. So I think you'd be shocked by just hitting the Wi-Fi on your settings, the amount of devices that pop
Yep.
up.
We actually do that. My wife and I do that every few months. We automatically, we physically do it ourselves, and we also, she has as a software. She has something she uses that scans our network and tells us this is everything connected to your network. And we're like,
There you go.
oftentimes we're like, what is that?
Yeah.
What? Who? Wait, because we
Yeah.
know, we have 3 iPads, we have
Yeah.
2 phones, so many
2
laptops.
Kindles, whatever
Yeah,
the
yeah.
case
We
is.
know
Yeah.
those things, and we always keep track of that. But it's like, what are these 2 random things on my network? Where'd they come from?
Yep. And
Why
it's
is my neighbor's Xbox on my internet?
or it's like, hey, we bought a new dishwasher, and all of a sudden you didn't realize it was
Or the
Wi-Fi.
fridges?
Yeah. So
Like the fridge you can interact with from the grocery store to see what's in your fridge?
yep,
That's a great idea.
critical. It's critical. But this wraps up the Internet of Things episode 4 for Hacks by Halftime. So appreciate everyone listening. Again, please don't hesitate to comment, subscribe, follow, download it, and hit us with any questions that you have. We love if you could throw some topics. We love to learn. So we'll dive into anything that's recommended. But yeah, thank you for joining us.